we'll pick it up from there and look also. Yesterday was June 12, a very special day in the history of Nigeria. And yes, everybody yesterday was discussing democracy, the rule of law, but somewhere in there, of course, the economy always shows up. So this morning, let's look at a year-on-year performance of the Nigerian economy amidst the celebration of a sustained democracy. And we're doing that with Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises. Dr. Yusuf, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ini.
So let's just see a little bit of some of the highlights of the economy. We'll start from inflation. Obviously, that's always top on the list. So we have inflation as of June 2024 was at 34.19%. And then what we have now, we don't have for June yet. We have for April. We don't have for May yet, beg your pardon. We have for April. And we see it now at 23.71. FDC is forecasting that it will go to 23.5 or 23.15. That's what FDC is forecasting. I think by next week we should be able to get the inflation for the month of May. Food inflation as at June 2024 was at 39.84%. Now for April, which is the latest number that we have, it's 21.26%. GDP for as at June, that was like the second quarter of 2024, was at 3.19%, while the latest GDP we have, I guess we're still waiting for the rebase number, is 3.8 for the fourth quarter of 2024. Now PMS, talking about transport, the major drivers of inflation in Nigeria seem to be transport and food. PMS on the average, as at June last year, very interesting, about 750 naira for a liter of petrol. Now it's over 1,000 naira, even though in Lagos we see it cheaper, but average for the country is what we're dealing with here. PMI, Purchasing Managers Index, was at 50.1, just at the tip, of growth. But for now, it's 52.7 for the month of May. MPR, that's the interest rate, was at 26.25. We had a little bit of movement, even though the last MPC, it was sustained, but it's at 27.5%. These are the indices that capture the health of the Nigerian economy at this time. Dr. Yusuf, year on year, we see headline inflation has reduced, food inflation has reduced, GDP has increased, petrol price has increased, PMI is looking better, MPR is higher. What picture does it give of the state of Nigeria's economy?
You see, when we assess the health of the economy, the indicators or the metrics that you have filled out are more on the macro indicator side. If you look at it based on the macroeconomic indicators, I think the economy has been doing well over the last 1 year. There are indications of stability across all the key macroeconomic metrics. So to that extent, I think we can say that things are looking good as far as those macro indicators are concerned. You talked about exchange rate, you talk about particularly stability of the rate. That has been quite remarkable. We have seen the inflation rate, trending downwards, even though there are arguments as to the methodology and all of that. But, even in the marketplace, there are indications of some prices that are dropping, and if you look at our trade balance as well, the trade balance has also been improving. We are beginning to see some surplus. So on the macro side, I think things are looking a lot much better. On the productivity side,
I thought you were going to say the micro.
Well, micro or productivity.
Okay.
Whether it is micro or productivity, I just want to simplify it. Because when we talk about micro, we are looking at how well the major actors are performing sectorally. And what cuts across all of them is the issue of productivity and competitiveness. If you look at it from that side, we still have a lot of issues. These things impact on, the cost of production. It impacts on the capacity of businesses to also create jobs, to retain jobs, and all of that. And the key factors influencing productivity are essentially what we call structural factors, essentially infrastructure, power, and more importantly, issues of logistics. We still have a lot of challenges around those areas in terms of productivity. So if we talk to the average business person, they are still grappling with the issue of the cost of production, cost of logistics, cost of power. Those issues are still there. So we still have major issues with respect to productivity. Then, from the perspective of the man on the street, what matters as far as the economy is concerned is the welfare. And the most important aspect of welfare issue is the cost of living. So generally, there's still a strong feeling out there, and rightly so, that the cost of living is still very high. Even though some of these numbers are showing that inflation is coming down and all of that, but the cost of living is still very high. So the struggle or the challenge that we have now is to get a connection between the macro accomplishments or achievements and the welfare of the people. Because at the end of the day, people matter when you talk about the economy. The first 2 years for me has been a year of trying to fix some fundamentals, have been years of trying to ensure that we stabilize the macroeconomic environment. And that is also very important, although people don't often appreciate it. But the macro fundamentals are like the foundations for the economy. You can't build something on nothing. If the foundation is weak, you cannot have a very strong superstructure. So what the government has done, in my view, is to stabilize the macro, which is looking good, both on the FX side, or even on the fiscal side. It's looking a lot better, particularly from the non-oil revenue side. So from that, it's good. But we need to now ensure that the benefits trickles down.
Is there a way to accelerate that?
Well, the way to accelerate it is to ensure that we activate the major policy instruments, because these things have to be policy driven. I appreciate all this intervention, palliatives, and so on, but they don't address the systemic issues. So you need to drive these efforts through policy. And we have a number of policy instruments that we need to activate to ensure that the benefits of this reform impact on the lives of the people, because that is the next major challenge that the government needs to deal with. Now we have the fiscal policy, which is about how you appropriate resources to what sectors and so on and so forth. That needs to be activated or recalibrated to ensure that we deal with this issue of cost of living. Because sometimes when you look at the budget and look at the way these monies are spent, both at the federal and states, because this is also a matter for the federal and the subnational and even local governments, because all of them are appropriating resources. How well are they appropriating these resources to tackle the problem of the cost of living? That is one. We have the tax policy, which is also a major policy instrument. We just recently have this tax reform. The bills have been passed. The president will soon assent to it. How do we activate elements of that policy to address the issue of the cost of living? We have to be deliberate about this particular objective. We have the monetary policy. Yes, the monetary authorities have always told us they are for monetary stability and so on. But they have to bring something to the table as far as this cost of living crisis is concerned. So we need to challenge them, without prejudice to their autonomy and all their things. They need to bring something to the table. What can they bring to address this issue of the cost of living challenge? We have the trade policy. Trade policy is about policy that impacts import and exports. What can we bring to the table from the trade policy perspective? So the summary of what I'm saying is that we need to deploy policy instruments to achieve this. A major hurdle has been crossed, which is about macro stability. But we need to ensure that this stability translates to improved welfare.
So, Dr.
And also translates to improved productivity. Those are two major issues that we need to begin to tackle.
Yeah, so Dr. Yusuf, I'm glad you brought in the perspective of the subnationals,
Yes.
the states, because sometimes it does seem like all eyes on the federal and we forget the subnationals. For instance, in the issue of infrastructure, power, electricity, there's a law that allows the states to now generate, distribute, and all of that. But it doesn't seem like they're moving fast enough, because I am sure that the story now that in a state like Lagos, individual generation of power is enough and in excess of what we need, in the state if it was coordinated. So I guess we should put more searchlights on this second half of President Tinubu's administration on the subnationals and what they ought to be doing to increase this productivity we're talking about.
The subnationals have a lot of role to play in this. Now, if you talk of productivity, for instance, in agriculture, the role of the federal is to ensure that we have the right policies, maybe subsidy policy, trade policy, financing policy, then some key infrastructure. But for the subnationals, when it comes to productivity in agriculture, you have a much bigger role to play. Because you are talking about rural roads, for instance. Agricultural activity, particularly crop farming, is basically a rural activity. I know how farmers lament about access between their farms and the cities on the market. It's a major issue. So we need to engage the subnationals to address that. Then even the inputs, tractors, seedlings, and fertilizer, all of those things. The subnationals have a much bigger role to play to ensure that the farmers have because we have been hearing stories about increased revenue at the subnational level.
And autonomy of local government.
Autonomy of local government. Direct remittance to their, these things should be spent to activate productivity issues, not to be building express roads. I'm not saying express roads are not good, or bridges or flyovers, but they should spread these resources in a way that is equitable, in a way that addresses the issue of productivity. Because it is through productivity that you can actually increase agricultural production, that you can also increase, jobs, employment.
But are the people intentional about, holding the state government, the local government accountable for them to live up to this expectation?
Well, that is an orientation that we need to change. Yes, there are issues at the federal, there's no doubt. But there's always this tendency to overlook the subnationals and the local governments and be focusing only on the federal. That orientation needs to change. Unfortunately, we don't have an effective institutional framework to ensure that we hold them very accountable, unfortunately. We have the state assemblies, but the state assemblies are not effective. Because sometimes you struggle to even distinguish between the assembly and the executive, especially at the state level. So we need to, activate or review our democracy to ensure that we hold the subnationals a lot more accountable. That is very important, so that they can also bring something to the table. As far as this productivity issue is concerned, as far as the welfare of the people is concerned. It's not enough for them to just be concentrating investment in the rural area, in the cities, in the state capitals. They should go beyond, and I must be fair to some states. Some of the states have been doing a lot to support agriculture, for instance, particularly up north, and sometimes, also in some of the other states, particularly in the southwest. But they need to do a lot more to ensure that they come down to the grassroots and impact on the people. Then the government also needs to activate policies at the level of agri-processing. Because when we talk about food production, it's not only about the farm. It's also about those who are in the value chain, because it's a value chain issue. If you produce at the farm level, it leaves the farm gate, what happens after that? What happens to processing? What happens to, preservation? Reducing post-harvest losses and all of that. So what exactly can we do to support directly, deliberately, the food processing companies, so that the ordinary people can have cheaper bread, they can have cheaper noodles? All of these things matter. Cooking oil, These are the things that the ordinary people want to see when they are talking about whether the economy has improved or not. So we have to be very conscious about all of this.
Yeah, and the people have a responsibility too.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Yes,
Dr.
yes.
Muda Yusuf, Chief Executive of the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.